What was the pursuit of happiness actually a replacement for? Property. And it wasn't like they were like, oh, well, we don't believe in property. Pursuit of happiness was what the founders thought was the synonymous with property. Here you see, we, the white male landowners of the United States. It's too long. But very much the fabric of our political system was founded on the idea of maintaining the status quo, protecting those who have wealth versus those who don't. And that's something to think about when articulating the Cap K. Kind of like Scott said, for whom is the question. We'll skip that. Whoa. All right, number one, capitalism isn't sustainable. So capitalism isn't sustainable. This is a convincing argument, but also not a convincing argument at the same time, because the entire theory of our economic system is scarcity. That there's not enough to go around, which is what motivates supply and demand. Okay? But that also means that at some time we're going to run out. There's not anyone better to talk about running out than one trainer. Says that the magnitude of global resource problem is not appreciated. The planet is now racing into massive problems. Anyone could bring up collapse of civilization, deprivation of the third world, resource depletion, conflict and war. The main cause is overproduction. If the 9 billion within 50 years were to use the resources at the rate of rich countries' annual resource production, would have to be 8 times as great. We would need 4.5 billion something of cropland. There are only water resources, they're scarce and dwindling. Mineral resources are likely to be very scarce. Gallium, indium, helium, copper, silver, and phosphorus, oil and gas are likely to be in decline soon. With demand would be 5 times as great now. Geosequestration can only capture 85% of the 50% of emissions from stationary sources. We have overshot by a factor of 5 to 10. Meaning, stuff could get really scary really quickly in a world where resource depletion happens. And in order to continue to have growth within capitalism, that means you need to produce more. In order to produce more, you have to use more resources. And so if resources really are finite, then we could be running out sooner than we desire. Which kind of does make our, I mean, you can think of this in 2 ways. Like one, like the sun will eventually, run out, and the Earth will end. So nothing is permanent, right? So the idea of worrying what's around the corner in the economic system makes just as much sense as worrying about the sun running out. Or you could deal with it a little bit more, with a little bit more immediacy, that this is something that humans actually have control over. And if you use more resources, then if we use resources at an accelerated rate, that's something that can run out a lot sooner than a natural disaster is more than likely to wipe us all out. So again, the question is for whom? If we're going to produce more, is it a question of helping the commons or helping those with economic power? Because, Keynes said, sooner or later we'll all be dead. We don't need to worry about future generations. The utility of this in the debate is that if there is a lack of sustainability, then this is not something that capitalism can continue to support, and it will eventually collapse on itself. Which means a transition has to happen, or we're just going to run out and people are going to, the earth will be unsustainable. The second thing that you want to weigh in is cap cannot be reformed. Okay? If capitalism's existence, both as a political and economic structure, is to maintain the wealth, to maintain the status quo systems of hierarchy, continue to lead to the disparity between the rich and the poor, then that's a motivation why the affirmative arguments that cap can be reformed are flawed. Even if cap can lead to technological innovation that can make things easily accessible to all, it's not within the property owners or intellectual property owners to give any of that away for free. For instance, diamonds, okay? Diamonds are beautiful. I bought a lovely one for my wife 5 years ago this August. Yeah. They're expensive. They're beautiful, but they're expensive. But they're also common, okay? They're not a rare gem, okay? In fact, they collect them and they only release a little bit at a time to create artificial demand. It's not in their best interest to let all of them go and flood the market at $50 per carat. Okay? The same could be seen as if we developed this new 3D printer technology or nanotechnological advancements that allow things to be easily created. All right, besides not being able to be reformed, government and military are arguably controlled by corporate interests. Many people would argue our latest intervention into the Middle East had more economic motivation than it did security. Others would argue that our desire for security exists only to support our corporate interests. Other people would say that military interventions are the most profitable for some of our key industries who happen to have lots of people in power. All capitalist motivations for conflict and reasons why reform should not be anticipated. Also, one would say that it might be that it might be the antithesis of growth, of conservatism to continue to consume. So if your goal is unlimited consumption, like if you're, the Thai, you consume all the time, even if that source could be considered renewable, if you maintain that ethic, then preservation and environmental protection remain antithetical. And the likelihood of environmental degradation remains high. Number 3, capitalism is crisis-ridden. Okay, this is your impact debate. We've already talked about resource depletion, externalization of costs. Okay, within economics, one of the problems that we see within capitalism, in a perfect free market capitalism, corporations are supposed to pay for all their waste. Any cost that's passed on to the commons is supposed to be 100% paid for by the corporation. That is, in fact, not the way that things happen. One of the easiest subjects of capitalism to criticize are like CAPOs, or concentrated animal feeding operations. Okay, they take a bunch of animals and and they put them in a very small space, and they all poop, and they all live in each other's poop, and then when it comes time to slaughter, they'll like wash it all downstream. And that feces and dead animal stuff is, contains antibiotics, other forms of diseases, dangerous bacteria, and that just washes a little bit downstream and ends up in our agricultural production, which is why we have salmonella outbreaks and things all the time. Externalization of costs. Another example, Walmart. Okay, Walmart teaches their employees how to get on government benefits so that they don't have to pay them insurance or pay for their medical needs. It's a way of externalizing costs, passing on costs to the commons. So the externalization of costs shows that capitalism doesn't function as a well-oiled machine. Another aspect of being crisis-ridden is a lack of satisfaction with class difference. Okay? If history proves enough is enough, if you can't afford bread, then revolution is likely to happen. And you can see this at hotspots constantly throughout the world where the poorest of the poor cannot maintain an adequate living standard, and life becomes untenable, and the choice of fighting over accepting the status quo becomes too high. Now, we have cultural barriers to that implanted here in the United States, right? We went through the Cold War, McCarthyism, where the idea of communism and socialism became synonymous with the worst swear words that we could possibly say. Equal to a witch hunt. But that type of cultural dissatisfaction can only carry so far. And democratic limits and failures. A lot of people will say democracy and capitalism are synonymous. In order to have a free market system, you need blossoming democracy. But others would argue that democracy and capitalism are antithetical, because the tenets of democracy are that everyone has an equal voice in the government, all of the population. While in reality, most of our legislation is written by lobbyists representing corporate interests. And if politicians have any chance of winning, they have to accept money from corporate interests. So, who has more power here in the United States? Those that vote for our representatives, or the corporate lobbyist interest groups that are writing the legislation those representatives are then voting on and then paying the politicians to see it their way. So the idea of an equal vote in the United States or a democracy, some argue is a ruse, because there is not an equal vote today. And lastly, the commodification of resistance. This is an identity politics argument that many anti-capitalist authors make, but Jack makes it really well. The idea that capitalism is able to continue to open up space to take into account groups of resistance. So the entire idea of the store Hot Topic, okay, is like, hey, you people that don't fit in, right? Come on in and buy our clothes. We got all those, body piercing stuff. And come on over, and you can be different than everyone else, except millions others that also shop at our stores. So capitalism can continue to expand based on commodification of resistance. It can open up market spaces, which is another reason, if you're running this, and the utility of the criticism is, if you work within the capitalist system, it's easy to isolate how a group can be brought into the capitalist system, especially within this year's topic, ecology. Okay, ecology and the capitalist system, you know, and ecologists are, you know, becoming friends. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. All right, I'm very glad that this type of argument is going out of vogue, though I will, and being less and less persuasive. However, capitalism has, as a criticism, has better than normal internal links to this. A commodified existence, okay, if your life is not your own, and your value is only determined by your next purchase. You know, whatever comes out in the next Pottery Barn catalog. That's me and my wife's favorite. I don't know what you kids wear, or I would throw some of that out there too. So commodified existence, the idea of satisfaction in your next purchase. Besides that, alienated through lack of work relationship. Okay, this is the old Marxist understanding of value life. Okay, Marx thought that we were born to work. Okay, that inherent within our value as individuals is our ability to work. And Marx says that us being divorced from the outcome of our work creates a state of alienation where we are eternally unsatisfied as humans. So if you take a manufacturing worker, because that's obviously what Marx was talking about, this was a hell of a long time ago, you're looking at an assembly line, and the person is, you know, creating something on the assembly line, and it's immediately taken from them, and they're given some paper money, or coins, I guess, back then, to compensate you for that. But you never get to see that or enjoy the fruits of your labor. And for that reason, he saw that as the, you know, tearing apart what humans' lives are supposed to be. And the last one is class difference. Obviously, you know, the inequality between the richest and the poorest can create a state that, by some, is worth dying for. And the last one, okay? I would put alternative solves, but that's just a lie. Okay, alternative needs to provide some uniqueness. Talking about the problems in your link arguments in capitalism is so easy, okay? Because capitalist authors write about everything, okay? My group that's working on the Cap K currently, we're trying to focus on books, but socialist websites literally write about everything. Everything you could think of, okay? So the link argument, the case turn argument, the terminal impacts portion, you know, I didn't mention it before, but the crisis-ridden aspect, all of those were internal links to environmental destruction or nuclear war. Now the problem is what's the alternative, right? You're going to face disadvantages to your alternative that are like transition wars, the same kind of argument that you have to face in a hedge bad debate that, you know, the U.S. won't go down without a fight kind of thing, or they'll stretch for hegemony the whole time. The same idea is true here. Okay? People are not going to willingly give over control. So, you need to win some uniqueness. There are a couple of, well, there are two main types of alternatives to articulate. The first one is like discourse-based. Knowledge spreading, okay? The idea of getting the word out and having it snowball. Question?
So sorry, going back to number 3 real quick. What were some empirical examples of how like capitalism commodified resistance?
People would argue that GLBTQ, like there's creating an entire line of commodities that are targeted towards the gay community. Open up markets first.
Are there any like instances or like specifically resistances to capitalism were commodified?
Resistances, yeah. I mean, if you own a Che Guevara shirt, I've that one with a little Chinese star. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, go to Berkeley. Okay. Discourse based. So the spreading of knowledge, questions like ethics, like the Zizek and Daly stuff, where it's just a question of if capitalism is wrong, then we vote against it. It becomes a question of ethics, not a question of solvency. Critique, okay, exposing holes in the system, shows that the ideology is not, in fact, certain. If you're brave, you can actually, quasi-fiat some kind of movement that's headed in the direction of capitalism, or headed in the direction of transition away from capitalism. The other option is you can also read pieces of evidence that say that's coming now, and usually link arguments to say that that will hurt the movement's ability to succeed. The easiest one is framework makes it go away. And that is, you create an interpretation on framework where, like, the role of the ballot is to decide the desirability of capitalism. And you can say it's fair because your entire 1AC was predicated on the facts, or capitalism is fact or intuitive. All of your impacts are reasons why you think capitalism is good. So we just have to win capitalism is bad. You get to weigh your act, seems fair enough. But what that takes away is the alternative debate, because now it's just about the desirability of capitalism and not the functionality of an alternative to capitalism. And then your alternative evidence can actually be used as reasons why this is a good form of education. And you can weigh that versus just the regular policy education. Yeah?
What alternative evidence or, I guess, idea of alternative you as a judge find most persuasive?
Me as a judge?
What alternative do you think?
Well, I think the clearest road to victory is making the alternative go away. But if not, I think the discourse-based ones are generally the steps. Or excuse me, if you fiat a movement, usually that movement is not going to be taken out by something like a plan. Otherwise, it would have no hope of solvency in any way, shape, or form because policies are passed every day. Yeah.
Is it a framework that says the judge should evaluate based on desirability of capitalism kind of self-serving?
Yeah, in the same way the one for the act is policy. Yeah.
Right. Is there a framework you can make that still furthers the goals of capitalism to achieve while being a little bit less obnoxious?
Okay, here's my problem with framework. I don't know what it means. Like, in terms of a goal set with framework, to me it seems like most instances, affirmatives and negatives have this disagreement on framework without any kind of a goal of what that framework is going to get. And so, if I don't know what framework could get you as a negative team, if not to move the bit or to take away your obligation to provide an alternative, or to meet the act. It seems like if the goal of your framework argument is not one of those two things, then and you're perfectly okay just debating the tenets of the criticism, then framework doesn't become very much an issue. Framework should be used to get ahead in the debate, and that the two most likely things are either you don't have to have an alternative anymore, or that the act that you move the ability of the affirmative to win the impact, or to win impact. All right. Some more topic-specific stuff. Scott went into a little bit of this. Okay, there are two types of affirmatives. when it comes to capitalism that you're going to have to take into account. The first one are ecological reforms. Okay, these are things that are within the ecological mode of thought. They're green in nature, okay? And the second one are ones that actually exploit more, like you drill more ocean, or you know, make the ocean private property, or you carve it out for economic interests, okay? Affirmatives that are based more on exploitation. Capitalism still works for both of these types of affirmatives. Okay, versus eco-affirmatives, there's an entire debate that happens between green and red ecologists. Most red ecologists accept the idea that social relations are a prerequisite to being able to solve the environment. So the question of capitalism is principle instead of working through capitalism. They generally also accept the tenet that we should operate in an anthropocentric way. So it also indicts the green movement for that. You can also talk about inefficiencies of the market and how capitalism's goal of resource usage is antithetical to that of preserving the environment. You can talk about the infinite need of consumption and how renewables only promote the idea of consumption, which means we will inevitably run out of resources, even if it's not energy. So they just create a new permanency when it comes to capitalism to avoid the crisis in the short term, to create a larger crisis in the long term. All right, I'm going to show you only half this clip since we don't have very much time left.
This is where we should start feeling at home. Part of our daily perception of reality is that this disappears from our world. When you go to the toilet, shit disappears. No, it's there in communication and so on. But at some level of your most elementary experience, it disappears from your world. But the problem is that trash doesn't disappear. I think ecology, the way we approach ecological problematic is maybe the crucial field of ideology today. And I use ideology in the traditional sense of illusory, wrong way of thinking and perceiving reality. Why? Ideology is not simply dreaming about false ideas and so on. Ideology addresses very real problems, but it mystifies them. One of the elementary ideological mechanisms, I claim, is what I call the contention of meaning. When something horrible happens, our spontaneous tendency is to search for meaning. It must mean something, like AIDS. It was a trauma, then conservatives came and said it's punishment for our sinful ways of life and so on and so on. Even if we interpret the catastrophe as a punishment, it makes it easier in a way, because we know it's not just some terrifying blind force, it has a meaning. It's better, when you are in the middle of a catastrophe, it's better to feel that God punished you than to feel that it just happened. If God punished you, it's still a universe of meaning. And I think that that's where ecology as ideology endless.